morning person, so I probably don't start until 10 a.m. I'll take a short break for lunch, then an hour or two before sunset I'll go running or bicycling, or if I'm in Cape Cod, kayaking. And then after a nice dinner with Rebecca, I'll often get back to work. It helps that my other half, Rebecca Goldstein, is also a writer. She's written more books than I have. So she not only understands the lifestyle, but she's likely to be working on a book herself at the same time. So we're always in sync. I do an enormous amount of reading before I actually put words down on the screen. For the book that I'm working on right now, for example, I'll have read for almost a year solid before even writing. Just familiarizing myself with the background, especially in fields that I was not trained in. I'm an experimental psychologist, so when I need to write on psychology or in linguistics, a field in which I've also been trained, then I can read what I have to read and know how to interpret it and write about it. But when my writing verges on areas that I wasn't originally trained in, like evolutionary biology, or history, or legal theory, or brain science, then I have to feel that I'm thinking like a brain scientist, or thinking like a historian, or thinking like an evolutionary biologist before I start to write. I have to read enough papers from opposing viewpoints within a field that I get a feel for what the controversies are, so that when I read a claim in that field, I'll have the red flags and the suspicions and the skepticism that a practitioner in that field would have. You can only develop that sensibility by reading the controversies to get a lay of the land. On my first pass, when I'm just familiarizing myself with an area, taking the notes and organizing them would be more trouble than it's worth. I do make extensive marginalia, both on the pages and in the front and back covers. This is just getting myself acquainted with an area of research. Then when it actually comes time to writing, then I will go over the sources again, and I will make extensive notes keyed to actual page numbers. I find through bitter experience that memory for passages, and worse, rendering of quotes, is shockingly error-prone. That when you're typing a quote from a book right next to you, it is very easy to get a word or two or punctuation wrong. And so I've forced myself to go back to the quotes to make sure that every semicolon is exactly as it was in the original. Organizing material is one of the big challenges in preparing for a book, especially since I like to illustrate abstract academic ideas with real-world examples, with cartoons, with song lyrics, with snatches of dialogue from movies, not as a way to just sort of tart up the prose or to wake up a reader in the midst of a boring discussion, but rather because the things that I'm interested in are things that play themselves out in everyday life. We all live by language. When I write about humor, it helps to be able to give examples of some funny things. When I write about conversation, to give dialogue from movies. When I write about violence, to have actual examples from the newspapers or the history books. So even when I'm not working on a book, I will amass a collection of psychologically relevant bits of culture. If I see a cartoon that makes some interesting point, even if I don't know when or whether I'll ever write a book about it, I'll file it in a file that I have of psychology cartoons. These are the ones for language.
How long have you been doing this?
Since I was a graduate student. This one's actually on a comic on free will. I've never actually used that, but it's got it's from Monty, and it's got a space alien who has a prognosticator that can predict the future actions of any individual.
So you have different categories. Taboo.
Yeah, taboo. I've got cartoons for irregular past tense forms, believe it or not. I have little examples. It will not only affect your kids, but your kids' kids. I heard that in a documentary on arts and entertainment on the real Aaron Brockovich, March 15th, 2000, said by Nola Wetterman, resident. So that's just a little linguistic example. Oh, Father of West's jackalope. We just throwed the dead jackrabbits in the shop when we came in, and it slid on the floor right up against a pair of deer horns. That's the origin of the jackalope, but for me, the fact that he used throwed rather than threw is something that I wanted to be able to explain. I'll get on language. So we've got a big dog up in the sky saying, well, yes, considering you people have been spelling my name backwards all the time, I imagine this would come as a bit of a surprise to you. So, on how you can't predict the meaning of a word from the meaning of the individual letters that make it up. So for just about any topic, I've got a cartoon somewhere. Oh, I like this one. I'm not sure what this is apropos of. See, the problem with doing things to prolong your life is that all the extra years come at the end when you're old. Then often when I start working on a book, I'll go through all of my interesting, topical, humorous examples to see which of them will fit in. Now that's just for clippings. For books, in articles, I will also clip out, and I have both physical files in a file cabinet and computer files. For my most recent book, I try to have electronic copies of every article that I will cite. For articles of the last 10 years, that's easy because they're published in the academic journals in electronic form and in newspapers. For earlier ones, I have an assistant scan them in and I make PDFs so that, and I'll have a hard copy. Hard copy is easier to mark up and to spread them all on a desk as opposed to crowding them into a little computer screen. But then sometimes I need to search for snippets of text, and for that it really helps to have the electronic copy as well. I actually learned this from one of my graduate students. He said that he didn't have a file cabinet full of reprints, that all of his articles were on his laptop. And you often learn from technology from younger people who've grown up with it. It never occurred to me that a computer disk would be big enough to store the equivalent of several file drawers of articles, but of course now as disks have become cheaper and bigger, it is feasible to keep your entire scholarly library of reprints on your computer. But for me, I try to have both. For books, in many cases you have no choice but to get books out of a university library, but I like to own books when I can. And so I do the one click on the online bookstores, and I have almost a daily delivery of from the UPS guy who's come to know me from all of my deliveries from the online bookstores. I like to be able to mark them up. I like to be able to go back to them. If I read something that I've written on a subsequent draft and I wonder if I got it right the first time, or I want to fact check, and it would take me much, much longer if for every book I would have to retrieve it from the library. Fortunately, with paperbacks and with used books, which are easily accessible in online sites, it's not so hard to keep an extensive personal library. I rely on rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. My books will go through anywhere from 5 to 6 drafts. What I'll do is I'll put down material in a first draft, and I write from beginning to end of a chapter. I dislike having placeholders like get back to this and fill it in later. So I try to go from beginning to end. Then I'll take one more pass, because inevitably that first pass will be choppy. There'll be missing transitions. There'll be unclear passages that I know are unclear because I may not understand them a month later, having just written them. So then I'll polish that chapter draft. So it'll be draft number 2. Then I'll go on to the next chapter. So everything goes through 2 drafts. Then I'll share chapters with colleagues who have expertise in what I'm writing about to get their feedback, so they point out the more embarrassing errors. Then I'll put the whole book through